The Jagged Path by Charlotte Osho. The Jagged Path tells the story of a young girl's journey from an idyllic life in rural 1940s Nigeria through the heartbreak of losing her parents' tumultuous years with uncaring guardians, an abusive marriage which ended in betrayal, to finally finding hope and happiness. In this powerful tale of resilience, fortitude, and faith, Charlotte Osho describes arriving in mid 60s London, faced with an onslaught of new experiences, unfamiliar foods, and a very different climate, and of course, the shock of racism. Hello, and welcome to a book at Deb time. Very different choice from the usual genres that I've been doing. But at the end of the day, the remit is I need to read the books I bought, and I bought this. I bought this book. It's self-published from troubadour.co.uk on the recommendation of one of Charlotte's children, Andy. Andy Osho, you may know from various comedy shows. She's also written books herself, which are quite crisp, sharp summer reads. I won't be reviewing them, not for any other reason than I bought them on Kindle, and that's outside of the remit of the show. But with the summer months coming up, do like and subscribe. Her books, Asking for a Friend and Tough Crowd, is more recently out, and in the slightest amount, I do recommend them. I marginally, I would say, I think to say that I'm friends with Andy would be a bit harsh in the sense that I gigged with her that time in that place. Um, and through her feed, she mentioned that her mother had this book coming out. For myself, I have always had a certain interest in memoirs. I think they serve a historical purpose as well as sociological. Since my own mother passed, I do seek them out more. Most recently, Gabriel Burns' Walking with Ghosts. I think we are talking, as someone who's a 48-year-old, I know you, is it is our parents' era is one that is very rarely documented. I also have tried to make the effort, particularly in terms of any sort of immigrant story. My Mother's Own, I suppose, resonates with that. And actually, with Mother's Day coming up, sort of led me to choosing this one now. It's really well done, Charlotte, as a first book, and I just love. Can I just say that if I ever get to write my first book, I couldn't. I don't know if I would have the confidence to call it my first book. I would be calling it a book, and you're right to call it your first book, and I'd be delighted to see your second. As a story, it's important because on two levels there, I would say as well, in terms of history, while it's valid and important to decolonize historical texts such as David Olusoga's Black Britain, which I've read the young adults edition of with illustrations, in the fact that we have to look at history and empire and the impact of colonialism. It's very hard at times because this still becomes an abstract concept, and it is only by dealing with the day-to-day racism of living history that I think some things can be addressed, because it's very easy for people to go, so what? And it really isn't, and it is to this day. Charlotte's journey, and I suppose it doesn't come as a surprise, did resonate with me in terms of what my mother told me about at the time. There's also, I should say, there's also the sort of narrative racism. Now, that's to me, that's the term I've made up to explain the stereotypes that we're brought up with, um, both in a larger white media society and within smaller communities themselves. I myself, as a mixed race man of Indian and Irish descent, growing up in Lambeth in South London, while I had a stronger direct exposure to a variety of black cultures, the stereotypes within them, for example, I need challenged because I won't be able to otherwise. Reading her childhood in Nigeria, I still run somewhere in the back of my mind, and I suppose part of it is to do with the comedy of the 80s, is of within the different communities of African culture, Jamaican culture, Nigerian culture, always stood out as being the more austere or even more middle class, for want of a better word. Charlotte's book really states very explicitly how that's not the case. She's able to write how that life is through a tone that is consistent throughout, but you can tell that it moves with her own maturing within the book. It's not, she doesn't write in a childlike way during her childhood. And the tragedies that occur, losing both her parents within a relatively short period of time, are dealt with by acknowledging pain while still moving forwards. Her own relationship with her husband here resonates a lot with the decisions my mum made when she came here in the 60s. The importance of financial independence as a woman, and really made me think about one of the things you often think about what a community has that you don't. I think that's kind of the grass is always greener kind of thing. For my part, in terms of our household, I've always more articulated there was no real extended family. There was no extended community because we were never, but it's not just being tolerated by white society, being neither fish nor fowl to others meant there was no real greater hand of Irish or Asian communities. And, you know, as an Englishman, I am an Englishman. The English seem to have other ideas on that to this day, but, don't hate me because I'm beautiful. Um, what I realized in this is that as much as we were kind of bereft of that extended network, there's also the fact that we were bereft of that social pressure of being part of a larger community. Um, Charlotte's struggles and conflicts in terms of a marriage with a man who falls into what we now recognize as quite toxic, controlling behavior and able to articulate it more is very much par for the course. The only way I'd have really seen this is in terms of anecdotes passed on by women of a similar age as her, and from watching films like Burning the Illusion. Just as a side note, something of its time, more in the later 70s, that I do urge you to seek out if you're watching this. Her pride, though, and her achievements getting into the NHS, and certainly the other aspects that we learn, um, how black nurses were kind of streamlined into doing what I would call the T levels. The idea that you don't need, oh, just be sufficient enough to do the course. You don't need to do the longer course. Just do this. That was happening till even 3 years ago. I was working in further education, and the idea that you don't need that, just do the easier course, just do the shorter course, without really telling. And this was from teachers of, I now really want to stress this, who are black and white, telling students they don't really need to do any more than A, B, or C. Kind of hiding the fact that if they did push, they could actually achieve more exponentially. That's still happening to this day. Um, and to read it written in such a way while taking on a sense of pride, and really, the woman's a powerhouse. As you come towards the end, you realize she talks about her faith. Now, I understand church. I am a man of faith, but ultimately, I don't want to discredit her own beliefs, but she reminds me of my mother in that nevertheless she persisted. Um, God helps those who help themselves, and God, she certainly does. There is a will there, as well as a compassion and a sense of duty to her children that you can't deny while reading it, and it is entertaining. The moments and the pratfalls and the foibles are dramatic without being hyperbolic. The humor is ultimately warm and kind of cozy, very moderated and earnest. But is it earnest, or is it just honesty of someone reflecting on their life in a way that I think even my generation, pushing 50, can be a bit too self conscious? Caveat, like and subscribe about with our documented world. I would also say that it's really well done in terms of quality, and the photos killed me. The family photos in here, um, obviously they have been placed, and the importance of photos for our generation. I mean, my dad had a cine reel, which he absolutely dug this thing out all the time. But as the years have gone by, and I realized that a lot of families of my age, they're lucky to have photos, let alone color photos. Um, Looking at these as a Londoner, seeing this Islington house and going like, you know, we had that telly, or I know those curtains, was such a connective tissue to me in this. Um, a mother's pride is never dull. What can I say? Please do order this where you can. Uh, as if she painted this herself. The woman's just everywhere. And also, just a classic example. I think this idea of oversaturation programs like this. Why I make them is because you should be busy. It might not be work, but you should be busy. Just if only for this and for this. I'm pointing at my heart. So, with that in mind, thank you, Charlotte Osho, for writing The Jagged Path. Thank you for listening to this as long as you have. And please do check it out as soon as you can. Um, you know the numbers. Thank you. Bye.